So we have a special guest today, David McMullen. I think it was only 3 weeks ago, approximately, assumed the position of Director of the Office of Physical and Neurological Medical Devices at the FDA. Some of you may know him from the NIH or from this conference in the past. We're so happy to have you back. And he has kindly agreed to talk to us about dealing with the FDA. Welcome.
All right, great, thank you. So, yes, I am still relatively new at the FDA. I joined August 1st, I believe was my first day. So I can still say I'm the new office director for OHC5, Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices, which might not mean much to you right now. We'll get into some organizational charts, so at least puts it into context. But I did want to spend the majority of today talking about how FDA oversees transformative neurotechnology. So not just what are regulations, we can talk about Code of Federal Regulations and final register notices, but more importantly, how you can interact with us when you have exciting new ideas. So put into context, the FDA regulates quite a few things. I believe it's 20 cents on every dollar that the US consumer spends are on products that the FDA regulates. What we do in the Center for Devices and Radiological Health is a small part of that, but I'd like to think an important part to the medical care for patients. This is the only very crammed org chart you'll see today. The office recently reorganized a few years ago, and so going forward, just think of OHC5, Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices for all these types of devices. We have two divisions, Neurodiagnostics, Neurointerventional, Neurosurgical, and then also Division of Neuromodulation and Physical Medicine Devices. You can feel free to take pictures of these slides, one slide, all the slides. The team names are here. It's just a way for you to understand that we do oversee these different products and that there's someone there that you can talk to. And the people listed on the lower level are the assistant directors, and they have teams of 8 to 12 people each that work with them, and those would be the reviewers, lead reviewers that you would interact with. And these are just some of the types of devices: deep brain stimulation, transcranial magnetic stimulation, some of the new exciting technology you'll hear about today, brain-computer interfaces, are overseen by the office and by these divisions. So our goal at CDRH and OHC5, we want to help advance neurological and physical medicine devices from bench to the bedside, to the market. And these are some examples of some technologies that have made that leap. But that is really something that I think is truly important. It follows my career, came from the funder side, from DARPA and NIH. And you all know the important bench and preclinical work that goes on there, but also some of the clinical work. But we at FDA hope to lower the barriers to get safe and effective devices from the lab out there into patients. I'll just have one or two slides about the FDA regulatory process and how we think through devices. Over time, you might have a really exciting, new, interesting idea, but it does need to get translated into the regulatory approach. And so there's a lot of different ways for self-education we can talk about at the end. People utilize different things like consultants, but we do have a lot of educational materials on the website. So at FDA, at CDRH, we think about the increasing risk of devices. And those go from class 1 or lower risk, class 2, moderate risk, all the way to class 3, high risk. And you can see below that some of the general controls, special controls, and clinical data necessary. But the simplest way is that the higher risk devices that you're proposing and want to bring to the market, the more evidence and the more oversight that there might be involved. And if you wonder, when you come to the FDA, who you're going to be working with, you as the sponsor is the terminology we use that's analogous to grantee at, let's say, NIH, would be primarily interacting with a lead reviewer. So that's one of the members of the teams that I showed you in the org chart at the beginning. But it's not just that one lead reviewer. As smart and as capable as that individual is, they rely on a wide network of experts within the office and the center wide. So on the team, you can see all the variety of different expertise that they would call on in-house to get feedback on your proposal. We as the management through various layers, through the assistant directors, the division directors, and the office can provide some background to the lead reviewer and work with them on really difficult issues. We have very complex regulatory questions, and so we rely on our staff. But we also rely on external stakeholders as well and experts. So we might assemble, you've likely heard about panels for vaccines recently. So we might bring panels together to provide their expert judgment and guidance on these issues. But even more broadly, we rely on the clinical research community to develop the standards and perform the research to put the benefit risk in context. So that's it for the formal org chart and regulatory pathways. There is much more to learn there. And again, I might briefly go through some slides at the end. There's information through guidance docs. You can just type in CDRH Learn into Google, and you'll find a variety of both webinars and educational material. But for the rest of the talk, I just wanted to highlight a few different programs we have that really focus on transformative technology and how you can interact with the FDA. So the Breakthrough Devices Program is a relatively new, just for the past few years, program that really was developed to provide a pathway for new transformative breakthrough devices to get a little bit of additional FDA interactions. And so you can also Google this. You'll see the different criterion that it can go through, but just be aware that this program exists. If you have an exciting new technology with some preliminary evidence of effectiveness, you can come in, ask for a breakthrough designation, and if you're granted that, you can then have access to a variety of interactions, we call them breakthrough interactions, through this program with the FDA. And so these could be sprint and other types that you can read about in the guidance document. But it just allows for more frequent, informal interactions with FDA so that you can help solidify your thinking on how to evaluate what is often very new and transformative technology. Collaborative communities are another way to do this. We in FDA can't come up with the answer to all the most pressing clinical research questions and regulatory science questions out there. But you as clinical researchers and companies can do that. You can bring together a variety of external stakeholders to say, look, we don't know how to demonstrate the safety or effectiveness to FDA. Working with insurers and CMS, we can't demonstrate value to them. Why don't we get together and work on this together and bring in patient groups and a variety of different stakeholders? And so FDA can be a part of these, they can be invited, but this is more a bottom-up type of community-driven endeavor. One example of how things can move quickly and how FDA can work on specific projects is the Act for ALS. It's Accelerating Access to Critical Therapies for ALS Act that was recently signed. And that's already quickly led to one critical path and public-private partnership between FDA, NIH, and private entities. And also something to note is when we have questions internally at FDA of how do we best evaluate some of the questions we're interested in, we put out a contract, and you can look at this online for landscape analysis of brain-computer interface focused patient preference information studies in ALS. And so this is specifically for the ALS patient population, but you can imagine when there's questions with new technologies such as brain-computer interface, the FDA, as well as other government entities, is really interested in trying to understand what is out there and what might need to be developed so that we can understand what demonstrating effectiveness really means. Some other less commonly used pathways is the medical device development tool, or an MDDT. So if this is sort of a complementary to the actual devices that are being used, and so it's a tool that can enable more accurate characterization of devices. It could be checklists or outcome scales. So if you have an idea, we talked about some of the lack of ways to demonstrate safety or effectiveness, and and you develop a tool that can help assess that, you can come in through this pathway so that you can work with the FDA, you can get sort of a validated outcome for that. And FDA is really interested in engaging with patients, physicians, and sponsors. And so I'd really recommend the Experiential Learning Program or the ELP program for those who might be on the company side. If you want the FDA to learn about your process and what you're doing internally, you can look for the open calls and come invite FDA and a variety of staff might be able to come, 5 to 10 FDA staff members, to really see your process and be able to talk with you interactively. And there's a variety of patient engagement endeavors ongoing, including patient preference. And the idea of bringing the patient voice into clinical research is of importance at FDA. And so we're working on a variety of different methods to incorporate that. And FDA doesn't exist in a bubble. We'll talk about a few different ways we interact with our government partners. So on the funder side, NIH and FDA have collaborations. NIH and DARPA, Dr. Dugan was here earlier. We would often present there. That's definitely very early stage. With FDA, with the NIH, the Brain Initiative is a good case study of one of many. The FDA is overseeing more than 24 first-in-human studies funded through the Brain Initiative, which is really exciting and not something we would have seen a few decades ago. And we also serve as members on their council so that we're aware of what's coming up. We'll be talking about the NIH Blueprint MedTech program in a little bit, and that's a relatively new program that was unveiled that's sort of an NIH incubator. And so if you have a really great idea for a new technology that you're developing at the bench, but don't have the entire ecosystem around you to bring that to market, it's a way to get both cash assistance, but also bring in experts that can provide some of that guidance along the way. And they just unveiled the new incubator hubs, which are even earlier stage hubs to provide some of those resources. And those are outside of NIH. So the Blueprint MedTech program is within NIH, and the incubator hubs are outside and earlier stage. So getting a device cleared is one thing, but the most important thing is enabling access for patients. And so through that, the FDA payer parallel review system was created, and the Payer Communication Task Force. And so the basic idea is that you have payers, you have CMS, and you can be having many separate conversations with these various entities, but it might also assist your company in understanding on the front end what the various groups are looking for. The FDA and CMS have different mandates. FDA is interested in demonstrations of safety and effectiveness, and CMS of reasonable and necessary. And private payers have their own internal mandates. But if you can bring people together, that might assist you in understanding the pathway, maybe doing one trial that incorporates different elements that could satisfy all those different groups, or at least understanding the overall pathway. And so you can look at the links there and reach out to myself or that group if you'd be interested in that. And as opposed to my time at the NIH, where I would just say, please reach out to me, let's have lots of conversations, that was great. But the most effective way at FDA is to go through what we call the Q submission process. And it's an umbrella term for many different interactions you could have with FDA. And those go from very early informational meetings where you're just talking about the technology and showing what can be done, to more formal pre-submissions before you submit a marketing application. But please reach out, and you can then get more formal feedback from the FDA through that program. And guidance documents are our way of consolidating our internal thoughts regarding certain technologies and approaches and relaying them to the community. So if you see something such as recent guidance on brain-computer interfaces, you can rest assured that is pretty up-to-date information on how FDA review staff think about these technologies. This is a article from 2016, but I think it's still pretty up-to-date that discusses some of what I've discussed and would be a good reference to refer back to. And so I'll take questions now if anyone has them. I have a few extra slides. I'll just quickly flash on screen of some relevant guidance documents, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. All right, I'll go through all the slides. Maybe that's, again, the public webinars and these websites are great. And these are honestly just listed guidance documents. If you know them, you can always just Google, they pop up pretty quickly, but are really good to reference if you are going to be conducting, let's say, an early feasibility or first in human study. You'd want to definitely take a look at that. You'd want to get risk determinations, understand what that means if you're not sure if your technology is of higher risk and might require an IDE.
Are there incubator hubs and blueprint tech programs outside of neuroscience, or just
Yes, so I'm able to speak more on this program because I did come from NIH and helped with that program, but in general, those are NIH-run programs. There are various programs out there, the Reach Hubs, if you look for that. This Blueprint MedTech was actually kind of built on the idea of those, and those are much older and have had several rounds. I believe there's one or two up here in the Boston area. So if you just Google NIH Reach Hubs, I think National Cancer Institute might have had accelerator hubs as well. There's different models, so those were external and are more local, so there's like a Boston regional one, whereas the Blueprint MedTech is almost an internal to NIH type of incubator. The Neurotech hubs are external, so more similar to the NHLBI and NCI and other Reach Hubs.
David, can I ask,
Yeah.
can you help us understand the difference between FDA's mandate around assessment of effectiveness versus CMS's assessment of reasonable?
It depends. Yeah, so that's a really important distinction. I think we try to be pretty clear in our guidance documents on benefit risk analysis, what the FDA, and those are the worksheets that are utilized so you can see how the FDA views its mandate to assess safety and effectiveness via a benefit risk analysis. And so that I can speak to. CMS has, again, a different mandate. You are likely aware of some decisions they've made in the recent past. You can look up many of their national coverage determinations to get a sense for what they're looking for, but that is why I recommend some of these parallel paths, not going back, but of inviting CMS early to the table and either yourself having discussions with them or bringing them to one large table so that all the stakeholders can be there. So I don't want to speak for them, unfortunately, but they are two different mandates. Some things that get FDA approval don't automatically get CMS approval. There was a tentative linkage between breakthrough devices and CMS coverage, but that was rescinded, so that linkage is not currently there.
So this will be a shorter question and shorter answer, I believe. Do you recommend to do pre-submission meetings before a clinical trial is going to be done, a pivotal trial is going to be done to?
I highly recommend that. You will hear different groups externally do different things, but that would provide opportunities for the people that are going to review your work to have some input earlier on. And those discussions are much more difficult after a trial is run. So the idea is to talk early and often.
Thank
Thank you.